Welcome everybody, my name is Michael and today we're doing a personal finance video discussing about mortgages. The problem in America with mortgages, the housing prices right now are exuberant. As you know, in Austin, Texas, a lot of people have been moving, and as you saw, prices went up 25, 50%, sometimes the worst case scenario, 100% in just 1 year. That's right, if you purchased a house last year in Austin, Texas, or in Seattle, Washington, California, everybody knows it's always been crazy all across San Diego, Los Angeles. All of these places have always been expensive. But now you have new cities that are becoming very powerful, very popular, and a lot of people are moving in. There is a demand for houses. There's only so many houses that have been built over the past few years, and a lot of them are mansions or houses that have large yards, and maybe not everybody can afford them. Not all millennials are able to spend the money. Very few people are able to purchase a house in all cash, of course. So what you do is you go to a bank and you ask, hey, can I get a mortgage? Or you go to a lender, hey, what can I do? Here's my finances. Tell me what I can afford with my salary, with my debts right now, because there's a debt to income ratio. And based off of my past tax reports, if this is going to be my first house, you have a couple options. The easiest is an FHA loan, which is a government loan, and all you need is a 3.5% down payment, which is pretty nice, but not all home sellers allow this. And it also doesn't allow apartments, or there's certain restrictions to that. Sometimes if you have bad credit, this is a fantastic option if you're a first-time buyer as well. Sometimes if you have really, really bad credit, they might require 10% down payment. But the average consumer in America usually spends between 5% down payment, maybe 10%. 20% is that magic number that a lot of people strive for, because then you don't have to pay for insurance on the property. If you go below that, insurance can be an additional cost, but there's two main numbers you have to worry about. First of all, it's obviously the mortgage and the interest, but besides that, taxes. Every single property will have taxes. Sometimes if you live in a very high cost of living area, the taxes are going to be exuberant. Other times you might be lucky and you might only have to pay a little bit, so that's always something to consider. And if you get below 20%, you always will have to add an interest. There's also HOA fees, homeowners associations, but I would never purchase a house unless I had to, because everywhere around the specific location that I'd want to purchase a house had a HOA, but I do everything possible to avoid that, because those will always be extra fees, and sometimes those can really add up to a few $100s, and they're not really. Anyways, it's very difficult for the average millennial to purchase a house right now, because even though interest rates are going down, the demand is going up. And there's only so few properties, and because of COVID, a lot of people have been gathering their money, and now you have a housing boom where suddenly houses are going up in value like crazy, and some are overpriced. Very few are actually fairly priced. Maybe you're able to negotiate a little bit. Check that out. Beautiful sunset, absolutely fantastic. We've got multiple factors at play here. First of all, the crisis that's happened over the past year and a half. Some people have come out on top. Some people aren't doing so well financially. Now, their credit scores might have gone down a little bit, and that's why FICO is actually developing a new system. Like there's FICO 8, there's FICO 9, there's a FICO just for auto sales. Mortgage lenders look at a lot of things, but over the past year, it is known that a lot of people, unfortunately, during the tough months, they had to use more credit. More credit utilization means your score goes down a little bit. So now they're going to take that into account. Anyways, so house prices have gone up, and a lot of people in America have everything on credit. Their credit cards, their cars, personal loans, mortgages, everything they can. Let me take this sofa or TV in a rate. What's the monthly rate? Now, that's not a problem. In other countries, you always still have people who just can't afford to purchase a house. It's actually even worse, where sometimes the family has to save up, and it's actually impossible for a person to just have money on their own. There we go. So if you're able to save up 5%, 10%, 20%, and you're able to find a property that's actually going to be in good shape and most likely not going to need too much investment into it, there's still always going to be some fees as a homeowner that are always going to that you should always take into consideration whether it's worth it to rent out or Or should you take out a mortgage? But the prices for rent have also gone up. And that's why you have now a lot of people who are deciding maybe it's time to buy a house. Except the first time you find a property and you contact the agent, she says, oh, there's 30 other people who are interested and sorry, the property sold yesterday. Super, that's great. It takes you a while to find that house and then finally you get it. So did we learn anything from 2008 recession? Now it's much more difficult to get a loan because back then anybody with 2 hands could get a loan without a job. That's perfectly fine. You want 5 houses? That's a-okay. Not really. There's a little bit more restrictions nowadays, but we're tending to lean towards the other way, and now it's kind of iffy territory. By that I mean you actually can get pre-approved for a lot larger house than you require. And this is not just a crisis where the house prices are going up, and there's inflation, and maybe jobs aren't paying as much as they used to, and the minimum wage isn't moving as much as we'd like it to, and people aren't making as much money as they used to. And remember your grandparents, they told you back in the 50s it was so easy to get a house. Yes, it was 10 times easier. Well, now you get pre-approved for a house that's maybe $500,000 when really you should be thinking about a $200,000 or $300,000 house, because when you actually get approved for that and you take all fees into consideration and taxes, you realize, hey, that's more than 50% of my income. Maybe that's all the way up to 75%. I've seen people as high as 80% get approved, and then they're like, whoa, that's just too much. But not everybody realize that. Some people take that house, they purchase it if they're able to, of course, if nobody else takes it from them. And this also gets a little tricky. Since there's such a demand, just as cars, I'm in car sales, just as cars are going over MSRP, sometimes $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. Why? Because people are literally able to pay that. Not everybody, but some are, and there's enough traffic that neither of the manufacturers are going to reduce prices. It's always going up, nor are the car dealerships. And same thing with houses. You have an agent who realizes, wow, there's 30 people who want the same house. Let me up the price a little bit. Boom, it goes up 15,000, it goes up 20,000. So not only did it go up in value over the past year, but now during the final days of negotiations, you're going to have people who are trying to bribe each other. Hey, you know what? Let me get this house. I know that there's 30 other people, but let me pay you $5,000 over the price. No, let me pay you $10,000. And there's going to be people with various bids, and the homeowner obviously will take the highest price. So you actually have situations where someone agrees to a price. I've seen multiple times on Reddit, on Facebook, somewhere else, somewhere online, someone's complaining, oh no, I had a house and then someone took it from me because they paid as much as $25,000 over, which is ludicrous because the house isn't worth that much, but that's happening. But anyways, you get a pre-approved for that loan, you pay over MSRP for that, not MSRP, but over the price. It's overpriced, it's overvalued, and then you realize you can't afford it. You have credit cards, you have a car loan, you have everything on credit, and you can't afford it. What happens if you lose your job? Suddenly, you have to consider bankruptcy. And some people, well, they choose to go the other way. Instead of going bankruptcy, they go to jail because they decide to do some fraud with mortgage. Okay, so what's my opinion in all of this? I think, as always, credit is a good thing if used responsibly. The problem starts when you take out a loan that's just too much for you. Have a car that's $50,000, but you can only afford a $30,000. That's too much car for you. If it's a house that's $500K, but you can only do $300K, you could technically do it. But if you're planning to live just off of ramen for the next 15 or 30 years, maybe not the best scenario, especially considering that a car loan, 5, 6, 7, they're all getting up to 9 years nowadays as well too. But a house, 15, and the average 30, that's a long time. A lot can happen then. What happens if there's a crisis scenario? Are you paying your health insurance? Are you ready for a health emergency? Or maybe something happens, your car breaks down, or you need to repair your house, the roof is falling, maybe there's mold problems, maybe there's a problem with a neighbor, maybe whatever happens, you're not prepared to deal with it. And I'm sure you're definitely not thinking about retirement funds and actually investing in cryptocurrency or stocks or any type of investment, because at that point, if your margins are so slim of whether you live comfortably or you're actually in survival mode or forget about it, you're actually considering bankruptcy, you can't invest, you can't play around, you can't buy fun things. Or you could. There's plenty of people that roll negative equity into RVs and boats, and yeah, that's also not a smart thing. But if you take out a loan even if the market's overpriced right now, if you take out a loan on a house that you can't afford, maybe you can find the home of your dreams and you're actually going to be saving money on rent. See, I lived in Poland for the past 4 years, so obviously it's going to be a little bit hard to compare. It's going to be apples to oranges, but I calculated that within the first 2 years, I spent quite a lot of money because one apartment was 4,000 PLN per month, plus there was a 4,000 PLN fee from the very get-go, so 4,000 times 13. Other apartments were a lot cheaper, and also towards the end of the 4 years, I also lived with my girlfriend, so we were splitting costs in half, so we saved quite a lot of money. But altogether, I estimate that around 115,000 PLN throughout 4 years, which, guys, remember, the last two, I was spending a lot less because I was spending half of what I would have been if I was living by myself, not including fees, not including obviously any utilities and internet and all that stuff. But 115,000, that averages out to 26, 27, maybe even $28,000 depending on the market. And of course, with inflation, we're definitely gonna, because 4 years ago was where the bulk majority of that came in, we're approaching $28,000. And this was in Poland, where the cost of living was 3 to 4 times less. So if I had the same standard of living that I had in Poland, but in America, let's just do 4 times, and let's just say, and to make things easier, let's just say it's 25,000, so around $100,000 for 4 years. If I plan to live there, I moved out right now. I'm living with my parents to save a little bit of money over the next year, but I'm planning to move out. I've been thinking about mortgages because I want to own something. I want to own my own home, a cheap home at that, because as I moved in Poland, I saw that there was a lot of cheap property, but that's a little different because then you're taking currency, US dollars, to move over there, which obviously you have a lot more power, you have a lot more buying power over there, and things are a little bit different. But still, if I lived in America and I was spending $25,000 a year, I know that's going to sound crazy to some people, but just stick with me here for the numbers. That's going to be around a little over $2,000 per month, where in most cities that's going to be a lot. But again, in Poland, my first 2 years, my standard of living was very high. I lived in the very city center in a 2-bedroom apartment, which for Poland was pretty crazy for 19-year-old. So if I wanted to live in the center of Chicago, I'd probably be paying $3,000 or $4,000. But in a lot of actual states around here where we live, the rent would definitely be, you can't find anything under $1,000, and then obviously the cost of utilities and all that. But probably $1,500. But just stick with me here, $2,000 per month. You can find a fantastic mortgage with, even, let's say, HOA, even with insurance, even with taxes, for a lot less. You can find something that obviously isn't going to be luxurious. You have to downgrade your lifestyle a little bit for the first few years, but there's a strategy to this, because you get a mortgage and you realize that this home, you're not going to hang on to it for 30 years. What a lot of smart investors do is they might do a rent hack, where sure, some people don't even have to get a mortgage. You just have to ask somebody who has a house, hey, can I, rent out a room, but actually rent out all 5, but rent out 4 to complete strangers, and I'll be taking care of that. I'll be technically a landlord. Yeah, very few people are going to be accepting of that. But if you have your own house, and whether you're renting it out for Airbnb, or you're renting it out to an individual, or you're renting it out in multiple rooms, if it's a 4 or 5 bedroom house and you're living in one section and you're monitoring everybody, there's a lot of ways you can actually make this work. So while you're paying off your mortgage, potentially with the help of others and your job and whatever investments you might have, if it's a cheap house, you can also build the value of it before you start renting it out. You renovate it. You renovate it so you get larger rent, and you're able to reappraise your house. Let's say it's a $100,000 house. That's a pretty cheap house. You put $50,000 into it. You're at $150,000 all in right now. Let's forget about fees, but fees would probably be, let's say, $5,000 realistically for something of this price, unless there's some major issues where, that could always be an additional $10,000, $15,000. But just stick with me here. So $150,000, and you appraise it at $200,000. That means you have $50,000 before you even start paying off your mortgage. You have $50,000 that is equity. So you made that money thanks to renovations, and now you're going to be renting out, let's say, one room, and you're going to be living in the other half. It's just a 2-bedroom house. It's nothing crazy. It's not in the best area, but whatever. Now it's worth $200,000. You take out a loan for your home equity. You could take out an HEL or an HELOC, a HELOC, which is a home equity line of credit, or a home equity loan. Those two, one is basically like a credit card. Obviously, the HELOC credit, it's like a credit card. You're able to take out money and pay it back, and you're only paying interest on whatever you take out. So if you have $50,000 of equity, maybe you take out $5,000, maybe you take out $10,000. For the home equity loan, you're paying interest on whatever the loan is that you take out. A lot of banks, they might even let you up to 85% of the value of that equity. So let's just say you take out 50%, $25,000. You take out $25,000, you're going to be paying interest. So basically you have one mortgage, and this is kind of like a little loan that's like a little mini second mortgage. You take that $25,000, and now you're going to be looking for another cheap house that you can do the exact same thing you did to the first one, renovate it, maybe not $100,000 this time, maybe you're looking for something that's $200,000, and you're going to take the $25,000 and you're going to put that as a down payment on the second house. So you move out of the first house after you renovate the second house. Now that one's got 2 rooms, you're renting that one out. Maybe over time, after, values kind of go up a little bit, after a couple years, you're going to have more equity, and as you're paying that one off, but you're going to renovate the second one, and you're going to do the exact same thing to the first one. Of course, nothing crazy, nothing fancy here. In a lot of America, a $200,000 home isn't, anything luxurious, but you're thinking, hey, I can do this. I can rent out to multiple people. I can renovate these houses. I can take out loans and get a third home, get a fourth home, get a fifth home. Treat this like a business. Treat this like an investment. Of course, there's going to be risks. One of the highest risks with this is what happens if the market changes. Second risk, what happens if you lose your job and you can't afford to pay the mortgage? And this is where it goes all the way back to the very beginning. You think the person who took out a $500,000 home loan that can't afford it is able to do this rent hack? Maybe everything's going to be fine. But what happens if suddenly they can't find one month some person to rent out and they lose their job? They can't pay it off anymore. They're considering bankruptcy. While you, the smart investor who took out a loan that you're perfectly comfortable with, that's less than 30% of your total income after taxes, you're able to do whatever you want. What happens if you can't find a renter for 2 months? All right, well, whatever, you take that as a loss, and you find somebody else, and after 2 months, you're doing perfectly fine, and you're going to go on to the next house, while the other guy is going to court. Bankruptcy court. That's right. So that's what I'm thinking I would like to do. I see a lot of people my age, 23, 24, 25 years old. They're getting their first house right now, and with the rising rent rates, you can use this to your advantage. Instead of paying someone else, you can buy a house, renovate it, do it as cheap as possible. The other third problem is you have to find a good renovation company. So once you find somebody who doesn't mess up your house, you're able to use them for the second project, third project, keep it local, so you're able to control everything. And this is kind of going to be a side hustle. Yes, it's going to take a lot of money. Yes, it's going to take a lot of time, effort. It's going to be very stressful. There's risks that you could lose money on a house. But if there's people who are successfully able to do it at my age with 20 houses, 30 houses, I'm going to tell you, I actually met someone who was 1 year older than me. He started his life as a real estate agent, so obviously he knows a little bit more about the market. He's able to get houses at a cheaper price, but he's doing the exact same thing here, except he's actually purchasing the houses before they're even done. These are brand new apartments and houses. He's renting them out. He's flipping them. He's making a lot of money, and his job is a real estate agent, so he's making very good money with that. He's got a great network of clients, which also makes things easier to flip for him. So again, this is just something to throw out there. Obviously, not everyone's going to be a real estate agent or a landlord or a developer or whatever. But you could do this with one house and maybe get a second house that you're going to be living in, and the first house is just going to be a rental, and you're going to be able to take out a home equity line of credit or a home equity loan that you're able to use either for a second house, a third house, or for cryptocurrency or any other investments that you might, as long as it's safe, nothing too crazy. So don't go into the crazy risky cryptocurrency assets, but ones that you can comfortably get by on. You can actually get out of this inflation crisis. You can get out of this home crisis. You can get out of this pricing crisis and the credit crisis. You can be on top of this. You can take advantage of this. There's people our age who are doing it, they're doing it successfully, and they're able to run their own business, or they're able to work as many hours as they can per week on top of this hobby that pays them very well. So hopefully they're able to retire early. And this all ties into personal finance because there's a lot of rules at play here. You can't get something that's too expensive for you. You have to double check everything. You have to make sure that everything's in tip-top shape. You're on top of the renters. You're on top of the renovators. You're on top of the market. You're on top of, hey, is this house actually a good buy or not? So you're learning about it. You're researching about it. You're studying it. You don't need a degree for this. You just need a little bit of money and a little bit of time, because you don't need hundreds of thousands of dollars to start with. All you need is just that first down payment for the first mortgage for that first cheap house. If it's 10 or 20% of a $100,000 house, you can save that up because you're probably driving a car that's worth much more than that. So I'm in a position where I believe I will still be renting, most likely next year or 2 years from now. But after that, I don't want to waste any more money throwing away to somebody else. I want to own something, and not just to live in it. I want to have at least, even if I'm not going to build a real estate empire, at least I'd like to own a second or third unit. I have someone in my family who has a house that they've owned for very many years, and it's risen in value, and they have a very good paying job. So what they've done is they've taken out a second apartment. They're in Europe, so apartments are a lot more commonplace over there than houses, and sometimes the apartments are worth much more, even in PLN, converted to USD, than some houses are over here. It's pretty crazy, and they're just using it as a rental to flip it eventually. So there is money to be made, and if you do it correctly, if you study it, there's not that much risk to it. Of course, there's always risk, but it's not as risky as some other investments out there. It's just something to think about. I wanted to discuss about this because I don't think I've really made a video ever on this channel regarding this. Guys, we're in a fantastic age of opportunity right now. We have the internet at our hands. We have very low interest rates and a lot of jobs right now. So I'm not saying you have to go out right now and buy a house, but maybe think about it. As the demand dies down a little bit, maybe next year or 2 years from now or whenever that's going to happen, it might be a good time to start thinking a little differently. Might suit you pretty well. So that's today's video. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button, and we shall see you guys, as always, tomorrow. Let me know what you think about this. And are you concerned about what's happening with our country, with inflation, with these crises? Because I am. Because, I'm not saying that the world's going to crash next year, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, but I don't know. I don't think the banks fully learned. I don't think Americans have fully learned from 2008, because there's always, on Reddit, there's every single day a post. Hey, I took out a $700,000 loan, and I got like a $60,000 job, and my wife also like $40,000, and we're in a lot of credit, and we're gonna go bankrupt. So it's like, great. All right, guys. See you tomorrow. Bye bye.